good morning, and welcome to The Skinny for Friday, October 11th. I'm Mitch Perry, senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, joined by my colleague, independent reporter Ben Montgomery. Good morning, Ben.
Hey, good morning. How are you, Mitch?
How are you, my friend? You were doing yeoman's work on Wednesday, hearing you for many hours here on WMNF before the storm hit.
Yeah. I felt like I had my boat tied up as good as I possibly could. My house was secure, and so I came in and lent a hand. It was so good hearing from so many listeners that they were tuned into WMNF, and that we, I guess we kind of did our jobs, just kept people informed and kept rolling with the punches. And it was great to be with all of you. It felt like, being in this one-way conversation that we have, this on-air broadcasting conversation, it felt good to hear from you and to know that there were folks out there listening. And now it's time to clean up. We're missing Ray. I was just helping Ray cut some giant trees in his backyard this morning, which is why he's not with us today. He's got a lot of work to do there on his property in Tampa Heights. There's a lot of people out there with
a lot of work to do. Yeah. A lot of people. And we're going to have a guest, Billy Christensen, who's running for Hillsborough County Supervisor elections. Good morning, Billy. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
We'll get to you in a minute here, talk to you. Of course, we had Craig Latimer on. We want to keep some of the flow of what we do here regularly, but in terms of talking about politics and elections. But obviously, we got to talk about the storm, the second major hurricane to hit this area in the last 2 weeks, and everybody just beginning recovery mode. The big question, perhaps the biggest question for those of us, because, forget it. I'm sure many of you do not have power, do not have cable, do not have internet. Can you find a gas station anywhere that has gasoline in it? It ain't happening yet, and it hasn't happened since Monday afternoon. It was the last time I saw in my home area of St. Petersburg.
If you're like me at all, you're watching the needle on your generator sort of go lower and lower and lower. I talked to a neighbor this morning who drove all the way to Land O'Lakes looking for gas, and that's sort of the double-edged sword. Sometimes you got to go driving to find gas. You're burning gas while you're looking for it, but she was unsuccessful. Really? Even all the way in the suburbs. So we'll be interested in hearing from you if you have found gasoline.
We're going to open the phones up a little bit later in the show here. Again, we're just starting right now, the Skinny here, but definitely want to hear from our listeners at 813-239-9663 about gasoline, frankly. The most basic things that we can do here on the station, providing information for you, and that's what I think MNF has been great with this week. I was saying to you, Ben, before the show, I listened to MNF on Wednesday morning when I felt like it was one of the last guys still living in my neighborhood in northeast St. Petersburg, which of course had a mandatory evacuation request that was by Tuesday night. I think you're supposed to be out of there. I knew the storm supposedly wasn't coming until midnight on Wednesday. So to me, if I leave by noon to Plant City, I'll be fine. And then it started raining at times a little harder. And I was doing a story for the Phoenix in the morning, and I'm getting alerts on my phone. You must leave. You must leave. My editor sent me from Tallahassee, sending me notes. It was a very stressful time for so many listeners, but it was good to hear you. Good to hear
Megan Bowman.
Yeah, you guys were a great team on that.
Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, thank you very much. And let's talk about power right now. This is the latest from about an hour or so from FindEnergy.com. People who don't have electricity in Hillsborough County is 474,523 people. In Pinellas, it's a little bit shy of that, 423,998. It's less in some of our other Bay Area counties. In Pasco, 109,000 do not have electricity right now. Polk County, 128,000. Manatee County, 155,000. Sarasota, where, of course, Sarasota County is where the landfall happened for Milton on Wednesday night, 141,238 people who do not have electricity right now. Governor DeSantis has been boasting a lot about this week that we've got 50,000 linemen from all across the country.
I saw most of them staged at the Bucks Training Center yesterday. There were hundreds of power trucks staging right there. I guess they go there and take their orders and then spread out in the community.
Well, right, because there's been some criticism that people haven't seen enough of these guys yet, but I'm sure they're going to be out there. I know that the TECO, the Duke, they had to figure it all out. In fact, Duke Energy, the president, Melissa, what's her name? I forget her last name here now, but saw her on Sunday talk about, there's certain things they do first, like including hospitals. They have a certain protocol.
Makes sense.
And so, and anyway, that's what's going to happen. By the way, if you live in St. Petersburg, which I do, although I haven't been home in a couple days, there is a boil water alert. And of course, if you're going to, so you can use water, apparently, including even Northeast St. Pete, where they shut down the water 24 hours before the storm came. You must use bottled or boiled water for your drinking, brushing your teeth, cooking, making ice, washing dishes. That is mandated right now.
And let's take this opportunity to remind people out there, if you're listening to us in the car and you're approaching one of those stoplights that is down, all the lights are out, treat that like a four-way stop. Come to a stop. Do not assume that you have the right of way and just blast through that light. There are accidents going on right now, and the last thing that emergency responders need to do is take care of people who are not paying attention where they're driving. I would suggest drive below the speed limit. Now is the time to not be in a hurry. You're going to save gas, by the way. If you're driving slower, you're going to save that gasoline. There's no reason right now to be rushing around. There's a lot of pedestrians out too who are enjoying this beautiful weather, which we should mention.
Less humidity.
The morning after the storm, we came out and it was like 70 degrees.
Indeed.
Finally, felt like a bit of a break, felt like late October. So slow down through those intersections, come to a complete stop, treat it like a four-way stop if the lights are out. Let's not hurt one another. Also, I feel like everybody is tense right now. There's a lot of stress. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know when power's coming back on. Take a breath. Relax. Don't be angry. There are going to be people who blow through those stoplights. Don't shout at them. There's no reason to get in a road rage type situation right now. Just a reminder, let's all drive safely if you absolutely have to be driving.
Well, in this whole thing, I don't want to be corny, but I went to that press conference on Sunday morning. This kind of alarmed me, seriously, in terms of when Sheriff Bob Guattieri from Pinellas County said up to 500,000 people are going to be forced to evacuate. He said this on Sunday for a storm coming just on Wednesday. This thing came pretty quick. We knew it was hanging out there, but with the dealing with the situation with Helene, the incredible situation here in the Bay Area, especially Pinellas County, we've been dealing with, and then to come around with this thing again is too much, so much to ask of people everywhere. And former Mayor St. Pete Mayor Rick Baker was there, and he said at the end, love thy neighbor. And I think that's really what it comes down to when we're in crisis like this, and you need good information. You need people to get along with each other, help each other out. Because again, these natural disasters, there's no playbook. I mean, the old playbook is like people in Pinellas County all sit through this storm. I've sit through them for 40, 50 years. Many people stopped doing that after Helene. I don't know how many people, but there obviously were some even who, look, I saw the story yesterday about in Clearwater, hundreds of people evacuated from flooding. Also in Kenwood area of St. Petersburg, there was such intense rain, the 18 inches of rain. By the way, Governor Ron DeSantis, as we speak right now, in St. Pete, at your old building, Tampa Bay Times building at 400 Central, where, of course, a crane smashed into the building there. One of the most intense events that happened in St. Petersburg. Everybody, of course, knows about what happened in Tropicana Field with the roof going on there. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell, by the way, she's going to be in Punta Gorda this afternoon. Rick Scott I'm going to go to this thing with Rick Scott in a couple hours in Ybor City. I don't know what he's going to be adding to the conversation, but he is running for re-election in a couple of weeks. And speaking of which, we're going to talk about, again, elections. And let's talk about this by elections, because I wrote about this week, is the voter, it's too late to register for the election on November 5th, and some voting rights groups are hoping to extend that because of the storms, right? Because of what happened with Helene. A lot of people displaced, thousands displaced in St. Peter, in Pinellas County alone. Anyway, the upshot of that is some the League of Women Voters and the NAACP filed an emergency lawsuit on Wednesday, hoping to get that extended, the registration deadline. It didn't happen. The judge struck that down. Billy, let's bring you in for a moment here. We're going to get more formal questions about your candidacy against Craig Latimer, but what did you think about these voting rights groups wanting to extend the voter registration deadline?
Well, let me just say that, we're facing some incredible challenges right now, both here in Hillsborough and Pinellas County and in our surrounding counties. And it's going to take, you guys hit the nail on the head, love thy neighbor. It's going to take a collective effort here to get through this. We have one of the most probably contentious and most watched elections coming up in the midst of this unprecedented natural disaster that we're facing. I'll just say, if there's anywhere else, if there's any place in the world that can handle it, it's Florida, the people of Florida. So, I'm disappointed, quite frankly, that there hasn't been any adjustments made, because we're going to need it.
Right.
We just need like 500, it's probably more than that, 600,000 plus people without power right now. We got mail-in ballots out there.
Right.
We have access issues, transportation issues. So I think there probably was some leeway for that, but the judge made his ruling, and we're going to have to roll with it.
Yeah, indeed. And Billy, let me ask you, let's bring this up about the hurricanes that can relate to the election too, and that is the issue of disinformation, misinformation. We've seen it, frankly, Billy, from some fellow Republicans, at least in the Republican Party. Marjorie Taylor Greene saying the government's in control of the weather here. What else we've heard? Of course, criticism of FEMA, some just not stuff that wasn't really true. I say Deanne Criswell, who's down here, that has been made a political football. Joe Biden, the last couple of days, you guys, has basically said, Donald Trump cut it out. I was interviewed by the Canadian Broadcasting Company a couple days ago, and they asked me this question about, how big is disinformation, misinformation, this? And to me, it's just like, again, what we're talking about here, and what hopefully MNF can do to be a force of positivity in this right now, is to, provide you solid information. That's what people need, so they can make decisions, the best decisions for themselves and their family. And so we rely on our government officials, whether it's DeSantis, whether it's Mayor Jane Castor here in Tampa, Ken Welch in St. Petersburg, and of course the president, and FEMA is the federal representative. They don't do it all here. They do certain responsibilities, and they're getting, because in North Carolina, maybe there's some delay there. What happened in the Asheville area, Western North Carolina, but it's kind of gotten out of control.
It really has, and it's not just politicians who are doing it. I was watching on Twitter as the storm rolled in. There was what seemed to be a legitimate video of a monster tornado rolling through downtown Clearwater. It took just a little bit of skepticism before you realized that is not real. That looks like a production. I don't know if it was AI generated or what, but the person who had tweeted this had been retweeted hundreds of times. And they were claiming monster tornado hits downtown Clearwater. Now's the time to be skeptical of all of these things. We're seeing it left and right. Like AI can make a tornado look like it's hitting downtown Clearwater. So if something seems hinky to you, provide a little bit of skepticism. Don't just be automatically repeating it. You know what I mean? Now's the time to be to put on our skeptic hats and take a hard look and try to get to the truth of some of these situations.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, it's 11:18. You're listening to WMNF 88.5 FM here in Tampa in the Seminole Heights, East Tampa area of Tampa. I'm Mitch Perry along with Ben Montgomery. Our guest is the Republican candidate for supervisor elections, Billy Christensen. We're going to get to Billy in a moment to talk about his election against Craig Latimer, but of course, want to give you the most up-to-date information that we have regarding the situation with the recovery now of Hurricane Milton. And God, I hate that name, but anyway. So, all right. So, Randy Z, our station manager, sent a note here. She says, and I'm going to quote Randy: "I know that many people in our community do not have electricity or access to the internet. However, if they can or can ask a friend to look for them, WMNF communication staff has created this resource webpage, which is mnf.org. You'll see it on there. Basically, I don't want to give you the whole URL, and share that as you feel is appropriate.
Yeah, there is a lot of good information at WMNF.org. So if you have internet access and you're curious about what's going on in the community, that's a good place to turn, as are some of the other local media stations. Sure. I immediately go to TampaBay.com, the Tampa Bay Times, because they've got a staff out there working hard to bring you the latest in truthful, accurate, good information. So whatever your media appetite is, there are folks out there working for you to try to help you understand what's going on and what to look forward to.
Okay, let's go to, see, is there something else here? Wait, hold on. We have another note here I've got from Sean. We can get that out here. And
we're going to open the phones here in just a little bit, Mitch. And we're curious about a couple of things. Have you found gas? And it's sort of like a fishing hole, right? You don't want to tell all your neighbors where you're catching all the fish.
After you get the gas, then you can call us up.
after you get the gas. No, but if you've found gasoline in the Tampa Bay area, We don't want to create a rush on the gas, but we are interested in sharing information for those who need it. Also, I'm curious, what are people doing to pass the time? I immediately want to listen to my audiobooks. That's how I relax. It's how I get comfortable. Thankfully, I still have cell service, so I can do that. I've listened to The Last Half of the Road by Cormac McCarthy, which happens to sort of seem interesting in this time.
Very
like
apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Yes, post-apocalyptic,
But
yes.
what are you doing to sort of keep yourself calm and pass the time? And we'll open the phones in a little bit. The number is 813-239-9663. We're curious to hear from you.
And our Sean Kinnan, the WMNF news director, he can't. Randy was telling me he can't come in because he has no gas. He's in Gulfport, which I totally understand. He has sent us a note. He's saying in the folks in Gulfport who need it, the World Food Kitchen and Shawarma King food truck will be handing out free meals beginning at noon today at the Gulfport Senior Center. That's at 5501 27th Avenue South in Gulfport. So
that's
Sean,
another good thing. If you know of food trucks that are up and running, if you know that restaurants have come back online, we're interested in hearing from you. I noticed just yesterday my neighborhood watering hole, the Independent on Florida Avenue, has reopened, and they were serving beer yesterday. I think they plan to do the same thing today. Businesses like that are starting to get back online. I don't know if they have hot food or not, but if you're a business and you've reopened and you're serving a hot meal, give us a call, 813-239-9663, and we're happy to share that information.
Absolutely.
I think everybody's looking for,
Because, I drove just over here coming over from Plant City, and there's a lot of places closed, and I'm told most of Publix at least are open.
Yeah.
Stores, although Tuesday before the storm, it was shocking to me in St. Petersburg. A couple of them were closed at like the full day ahead of the storm, which I've never seen here. I get it, though. I think it was responsible that their own employees evacuate because those both stores were completely in the evacuation zone. So what's the segue, Billy? I know it's kind of a little awkward, but it's not because we do have this election, and again, some people have their vote by mail ballots right now. Maybe they're voting right now as we speak, actually considering the race. So you are. Let's give the center here centerpiece of this. Craig Latimer is a incumbent Democratic supervisor election. He has been here since 2012. We had him on the show last week. He's running for another 4-year term. You are a Republican candidate. You have never ran for office before. You are a realtor, I believe, right? You previously served at U.S. Central Command, and now you want to be the next supervisor of elections in Hillsborough County. So the first thing I have to ask you is, Billy, what's your qualifications for this to do such an important job here in Hillsborough County?
Yeah, again, thanks for having us. And just to answer your question about gas, Brandon on 301 and Bloomingdale has gas, the Wawa.
Oh, the Wawa at 301 and Bloomingdale in Brandon.
If you can stand the line.
Okay, thank you for that. Great.
And back to your question about, my experience and qualifies me. I am a 20-year intelligence professional. I have 9 years active duty Air Force. I spent the remainder of that time at my civilian career at U.S. Central Command. I have a master's degree in international relations. At U.S. Central Command, I managed $3.5 billion in urgent warfighter needs on a staff of 5,000 people. I'm a husband, a father, and that in itself, and I'm a property owner here in town. So, we have ample qualifications to run this office. I think any citizen in this state has an opportunity to run for any office.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, we think that we're in a better position to run that office a lot more effectively and efficiently.
And is that because of what you did at CENTCOM?
Primarily, a lot of that, it's a 50-man staff at the supervisor of elections office. And from what I'm hearing, it's a pretty toxic environment, and that usually is a leadership issue. I've worked in toxic environments, and almost every time it's a leadership issue.
How'd you pick this office, the supervisor of elections?
That's a great question. My wife was part of the 58,000 people that were victimized in the data breach in May of 2023. And just so folks are aware, our supervisor of elections office had a cyber hack, or at least they're couching it as a cyber hack, in May of 2023, in which 58,000 voters had their personal information stolen, to include their Social Security and driver's license numbers. And unfortunately, since that announcement, there hasn't been a single update. And Mr. Latimer hides behind this ongoing 16-month FBI investigation. And that right there is an issue. We have an ongoing FBI investigation in our supervisor of elections office here in Hillsborough County, as we're coming up to probably the most critical election in our lifetimes. So I can tell you from my experience as a 20-year intelligence professional, if the FBI is investigating in the nature that they are, it means one of two things: that there's a foreign element or an organized crime element involved. I just actually last night, in the midst of all this, got a FOIA request response back from the FBI, which they denied and updated as well because of the criticality of the ongoing investigation.
Really?
Yeah, and one of the excuses they gave me is that the people involved may be on a watch list. So here's my message to the voters. It's not necessarily Mr. Latimer's fault that there was a cyber hack. There are some fundamental security protocols from just the general security to the cyber security in our elections office here in Hillsborough County. Our supervisor is out of touch. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't have the experience. We were attacked, and it may couch it however you want, but the lack of response to the community is the troubling part here. Right. We don't know if it's been secured. We don't know if it's ongoing.
Right.
We don't know to what level it's been hacked. There needs to be an update.
Okay, and I have a response from Craig Latimer. Before, so you left CENTCOM in 2018, was it?
2016, yes,
2016.
sir.
And why did you leave at that time?
It was time to retire, to resign, step away. We wanted to start a new, I got married.
Okay.
We had a family. I was looking at some other government opportunities in different areas, some advancement opportunities. And as a family, we decided we wanted to stay here in Tampa, and here we are. So we took the opportunity to start a real estate business. It was going extremely well, still is. But, in light of some of the election security issues we saw in 2020, the fact that my wife was victimized in this data breach,
right.
And then as I started asking Mr. Latimer questions, it became very apparent that he's just not interested in answering questions.
Let me ask you about this. And again, if people are just tuning in, that's the voice of Billy Christensen. He is a Republican running for the supervisor of elections in Hillsborough County. I'm Mitch Perry along with Ben Montgomery. We are live here in WMNF. We're talking with the hurricane, but we're also taking some minutes right now to talk to a candidate for office, Billy Christensen. Billy, you said after the 2020 election, because this seems to be a lot of folks who never really, I don't know how much they really followed politics. Maybe they did a lot. People who have these issues with what happened in the 2020 election with Donald Trump. And they're sometimes called voting integrity candidates, sometimes derisively election denying candidates. I know you have said you believe the 2020 election was legitimate. Is that correct?
The outcomes are what they are. I mean, they've been established and validated. So, President Biden, everybody asks about
yes,
President Biden won. Nobody's focusing on the down ballot candidates. But,
okay.
So to answer the question, obviously President Biden has won the election.
Okay, but is there an issue with down ballot race?
I do think there are some issues here in Hillsborough County with our local elections, and it affects our local candidates a lot more than it does our national candidates. And it's in terms of blank ballots. We had 21,000 plus blank ballots cast in 2020. Nobody can really detail what that means, but it is definitely an election anomaly. There was an adjustment made after 2022 integrity laws that the state implemented.
Right.
And that 21,000 in 2020 counted for 3% of the total votes cast. After the election integrity laws, which were requested by both parties, that 3% dropped to 0.0009%. So it was definitely an anomaly, and the only change there was that there was an image that was required for the blank ballots for audit purposes. That was the only change.
What is a blank ballot?
That's a great question. Nobody can give us precise definition. It's a measurable on the final report or election report, and I usually have my book here. I'll show you.
Yeah.
But we had 21,000, and what Mr. Latimer says is that if somebody votes on page 1 of a 3-page ballot, then pages 2 and 3 become blank ballots. That's not accurate.
That's what he has said.
Right.
You're saying that's inaccurate.
That's inaccurate. And I've asked him to provide an official definition. He refuses, and at one of the public records requests, which he refuses to answer. And it's unfortunate. Yeah. So
his response to that, and I'm not sure if he was particularly talking about blank ballots, but he said toward you, he doesn't necessarily understand how public records requests work, and that sometimes they take a long time to collect, and often they require staff time, which the requester has to pay for. And he was suggesting to us on air that sometimes they've provided you with a cost associated with that records request, and you've just refused to pay the cost. Is that accurate?
It's a half truth, Mr. Latimer. I've submitted about 40 public records requests, starting with like the fundamentals. What's an organizational chart, so I understand what the facility or the organization looks like. He won't provide an organizational chart. We've gotten into the manpower contracts, just the fundamental organizational requests he refuses to provide. When he charges for a public records request is when it's in something like how much taxpayer money has been spent for Florida Supervisor of Elections, Inc. He refuses. He charges $2,000 because that's a tangible number that he probably doesn't want the community to see. Or, for example, how many equal opportunity complaints have been filed against you? You know, these things won't, he charges for these answers. I'm like, these are ludicrous to charge answers for. We have a staff of 50. I can assure you when I'm elected that we're going to do everything that we can to limit charging of public records requests. That's public information. It shouldn't cost money.
Well, sometimes they do, though.
If you have to consolidate
with all due respect, having operated in the sphere of making many public records requests, it's a common practice for agencies to charge. And fortunately, I had the newspaper paying for those. I wasn't paying out of pocket. And so, but I remember dealing with the Department of Juvenile Justice years ago in relation to the Dozier story. And I would make big requests and they would say, well, this is going to cost you $10,000 or whatever the amount was. Would you like to refine your request? And so then I would refine that request and they'd say, well, this will be this much staff time we predict, and this will cost you this much. And then you sort of decide whether you want to pay that cost.
Exactly.
Is that the...
yeah, exactly. We put in, you know, I'm not going to spend $2,000 to chase down, of my personal money, to chase down what he spent on taxpayer funds because he doesn't want to answer it. It just does... There's
well, hold on, though, because that, I think what you're saying is he doesn't want to answer it, but the fact is it costs time.
Well, I'll give you another example.
We're paying for those salaries, right? Taxpayers. So it's costing time for them to respond to your records requests. You feel like it's not fair?
I think there is an inherent responsibility for all elected officials and offices to provide information to the public, especially as it relates to our elections process. Now, Mr. Latimer, I provided a request or submitted a request for how many non-citizens have officially registered in Hillsborough County, and that's another one where he charged. He submitted a response with a $200 charge, right? And then he comes out, I heard him on the air there and say that, okay, there's 65 or however many it was. So he has that information readily available. It's just that when
he's charging you
specifically.
Okay.
So
guys, I wanted to give some updates what's going on here. Let's see here. Tyrone, I'm sorry, we're going to jump in between here. It's a little different show than normally here. So again, we're talking to Billy Christensen, the Republican running for county supervisor elections in Hillsborough County. We also want to get your phone calls if you want to call in about what's going on with the hurricane situation. Tyrone Boulevard and 66th Street, we are told in St. Petersburg. The caller says the mall is being opened, so there was air conditioning relief there for folks. Okay, thank you.
Is that Tyrone Mall?
It must be, right? Yeah, okay, they didn't say that, but yeah. And then also we had a caller comment says, I want to know if we haven't been declared a disaster area. Good question.
I can look that up.
Look that up, Ben. So right now, again, a couple other things, but we want to talk about here. We're going to go up top with you, Billy, but I'd love to get your thoughts about this. So I'm going to talk about, what do we do here in terms of these storms? Back-to-back storms. It's not unprecedented. We had 4 storms in 7 weeks in 2004. That was very stressful to the community as well. But in fact, these 2 major storms in 13 days have a lot of people really going like, can I still live in Florida? Do I want to live in Florida? Forget about the issues with property insurance and the affordability crisis that have already made Florida, definitely a more challenging place for people to live than, maybe this issue 5 to 10 years ago. Now you have this issue with the weather. Not necessarily talk about climate change, although I always do want to talk about that. But and I don't believe when some folks, I think Ron DeSantis was asked about this yesterday, by the way, folks, and we can get to that to answer in a second. But I think some people want to say almost like, well, wait a minute, we just have to deal with this crisis right now. Then we can talk about that. It kind of reminds me whether there's a gun shooting and people say it's not the proper time to talk about guns. And it's like, if it's not then, when is it? When is the proper time? But again, it's such a incomprehensive issue in terms of rebuilding on the coast. Certainly what we've seen in Pinellas County. By the way, let's talk about the baseball stadium. Ben, we did a lot of shows. It's a couple shows, I should say, not a lot of shows, but a couple shows on the baseball stadium. The Rays, we saw, of course, what happened in Tropicana Field, the stadium roof the other night. The taxpayers of just Pinellas County are going to pay over $300 million for the stadium. That's going to be out of the bed tax, right? So theoretically, it doesn't really hurt the regular citizen here. But what are those bed taxes going to be like now in the coming year, if not years, now that most of those motels are inoperable along the beaches of Pinellas County? So the tourism industry is going to take a hit of some sort here. That's problematic. Not that people should have thought about that or not thought about that in terms of when they made their vote in the county commission. City of St. Petersburg, people are having some issues with the infrastructure that's going on there with these, treatment plants, water situation. It's going to cost every taxpayer, I believe, over $600 to help pay for that stadium in St. Petersburg. It's close to $300 million in direct. I think it's 280 something million to pay for the stadium. Anyway, so the city of St. Pete and the county of Pinellas County has a lot on its plate right now to deal with this storm. It's going to take months, if not years. And we're also paying for this ballpark now without a public funds. I think it's, some people can look at it like, what's the deal with the priorities there? When we get to Governor, anybody want to weigh in on that?
Well, you covered a number of topics there, Mitch. So, you got to think that, who's vacationing in Florida right now with things the way they were? I will say that I took a walk last Wednesday. I took a walk from Clearwater Beach to Paso Grills, like 30 miles right down the beaches, just to see with my own eyes what was going on out there. And I hilariously saw a number of people who were clearly tourists who were sort of sitting in the debris fields, with pin shells rotting around them and stone crabs dead on the beach and blowfish washing up, and not to mention all of the human trash that we produced that had been sort of sucked off the beaches and was just piling up in the surf. So there are some tourists who might have gotten stuck out here, continued with their vacation and rode out Helene during that vacation time. But you got to think, we're missing 2 or 3 weeks, and I don't know the math on this, but 2 or 3 weeks of tourism at a minimum in Florida has got to hurt in that regard. This is money that we're missing.
Absolutely.
Right? Especially when bed taxes pay for so much around here. I mean, they go toward
beach renourishment, by the way, for those beaches, which are, again, crucial for the economy of this community here, the Tampa Bay area. Ron DeSantis yesterday was asked in, it was at Fort Pierce, the issue of climate change was brought up to him. Let me quote you. He said, I think he said basically there are, kind of crazy statements made from both sides of the aisle. This is the exact quote. This is on both sides, he says. You kind of have some people think government can do this, control the weather, and then others think it's all because of fossil fuels. He says the reality is what we see. There's precedent for all of this in history, like it is hurricane season. You are going to have tropical weather. And then as my colleague at the Florida Phoenix wrote about, he says a similar claim was echoed by conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, who said the federal government could have stopped Hurricane Helene. He said that? He did. When asked if the number of tornado warnings and touchdowns for Hurricane Milton could be associated with climate change, the governor said, quote, I think you go back and find tornadoes for all of human history for sure. He went on, I just think people should put this in perspective. They try to take different things that happen with tropical weather and act like it's something. There's nothing new under the sun. The new
thing is that measurable sea level rise in Tampa Bay is 7 inches from 30 years ago. So the seas are 7 inches higher. Now, that might not seem like much because it's gradual, because sea level rise, sea level change happens over a lifetime. This is not something quick. When we notice is when a storm blows in and the part of your property that didn't flood last time now floods. It's because there's additional water. Now, there's a law of physics that as water gets warmer, it expands.
Right.
As air molecules get warmer, they hold, for every degree of Celsius rise in air temperature, they hold 7% more water. This was the hottest summer in all of recorded human history. In the city of Tampa, we set records, as you know, many, many times, days when the heat was more oppressive than it had been in the past. So that is a measurable fact. For folks to deny that the severity and intensity of these storms are just one-off happenings and unrelated to the carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere, I think is folks with their head in the sand.
Well, Rick Scott, 2 weeks ago, right after Helene, he was quoted as saying that on CNN, you guys might have seen him, he was interviewed by Dana Bash, and he was asked, she asked him, she said, let's see here. I wrote this, I'm reading from here. the big what they talk about Helene, which is one of the biggest storm systems that hit the U.S. He was asked if it was part of a trend in which storms are, quote, simply bigger than they once were, perhaps because of climate change. He was asked, and Scott answered, who knows? Who knows what the reason is? But something is changing. Massive storms, massive storm surge. So we've got to figure it out. And Dana Bash followed up. She said, when you say something's going on, isn't it pretty obvious that the climate is changing, that is changing the size of these storms and making them as big as, you just described? And then Rick Scott came back and said, absolutely, something's changed. And the climate's clearly changing. And what we've got to do is, like, when I was governor, I spent a whole bunch of money on resiliency and sea level rise issues and beach renourishment issues. And I tried to make our state more resilient. He added, we know things are changing. We've got to figure out, how do we react to that? And
they've been changing for a very long time, Mitch. The first mention I ever saw of global warming in American newspapers, and I did a lot of research on this, was 1953. And they didn't necessarily understand it, but one of the suggestions was we have been emitting since the industrial age more carbon into the atmosphere. So you go back to 1953 and they're saying, look, it's getting warmer. In New York, you can no longer ride a horse and carriage across the frozen Hudson River in the wintertime. Again, this is 1953. And from that point forward, there have been a number of scientists, warning us in American newspapers and American media, warning us over and over and over again, the carbon that we're emitting with industrial technology new technologies after the industrial age, automobiles, burning greenhouse gases in all sorts of ways, the beef production, deforestation, all of these things are leading to a warmer planet. And it makes sense to me that a warmer planet means more intense storms because of what we know about physics. By the way, I will just say, Mitch, almost the entire state of Florida outside of the Panhandle is right now a Florida disaster area.
Okay.
Since 10/7, it's been declared by FEMA a disaster area. So whatever caller was asking about that, I'm not sure what the question was.
Right.
But we are currently maybe like 59 of the 67 counties in Florida are in state of have been declared disaster areas.
Okay, we had a caller here, and I do want the public to weigh in if they want to here before we get off the air here. Let's see. Let's go to Stanley. You're on the skinny here. Good morning. Let's see. Stanley?
Bear with us, folks. Hurricane time.
Are we getting Stanley? Are you there, sir? No? All right.
Let's redirect. Oh, he's there. Yeah, I'm getting thumbs up from Jessica.
Okay, Stanley, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the show, as always. I just want to say, and then my brother echoed this, it seems like decades ago, didn't the world kind of come together to combat aerosols, and we reduced the growing hole in the
ozone layer. We sure did, yeah.
But yet now we cannot come to a consensus, especially in the United States, on climate change, and that fossil fuels is causing it because we have such a radical right-wing party that's pretty much in charge of, well, at least of the House, and them holding future money hostage for FEMA is just how anybody can vote for them. It's just unfathomable. I'm a native Floridian, 6th generation, and my ancestors even say they've never seen storms this frequent and the severity. So.
Okay. I feel like thank you, Stanley. Thank you for the call, Stanley. I feel like I quit trusting in politicians to address this issue a long time ago. Although I do vote for people who believe in science and who listen to warnings and heed advice. I feel like I can only control what I do on a personal level.
Right.
And can I drive less? Absolutely. Can I emit less Can I behave in a way that emits less carbon?
Yeah.
And sometimes this leads to making serious decisions. A lot of people out there like eating hamburgers.
Yeah.
There's not much that you can do worse for the environment than eat beef, than eat the beef production in the world is the cause of a lot of this. And so but that's a tough decision, and that's a big ask. A lot of even environmental organizations don't tell people that you got to be a vegan in order to be a good citizen and reduce your own carbon footprint. But it's because it's such a tough ask. You start talking about ways in which individuals can reduce their carbon footprint, and you very quickly cut to some difficult behavioral changes. Driving less, eating less meat. Those two things alone are stuff that a lot of citizens just don't sort of want to hear. You know what I mean?
Well, public transportation has always been an issue because we don't really have it. You know, I came here almost 25 years ago, and that was the big issue in Hillsborough County then. You might remember it took till 2010. There was the Moving Hillsborough Forward initiative that would have been about light rail that went down to defeat. Then we had the Green Light Pinellas initiative in Pinellas County in 2014. By the way, now we don't talk about light rail at all. That is like gone. Now they're talking about, I don't even know, they're talking about BRT. I don't even know what the transportation people are doing down here at all. And that's part of it too. And I think that's an issue with like Florida, basically, refusing to embrace. I know they have some rail in Miami, South Florida, in terms of down there. Anyway, so
these are arguably not issues that the Supervisor of Elections office necessarily has to deal with. But Billy, I mean, what's your take on all this? What do you think? Am I wrong?
Well, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'll just say, I'll admit it. I love steak and hamburger, so I'm not going to stop eating beef. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
But in terms of Supervisor of Election, these issues that everybody's passionate about is why we need to have fair, secure, and honest elections so that the rightfully elected people can go and advocate on these issues, especially I'm more focused on our local elections here in Hillsborough County because those are the things that directly impact the way we live, and we're feeling it. You mentioned a lot of the challenges we're facing. You missed one. Insurances in the state. The insurance costs in the state is through the roof.
Right.
And I suspect it's going to go higher.
I'm shocked that disaster insurance is actually even still a thing. You know, the idea of disaster insurance in Florida, when we face these disasters so regularly, this one will cost up to $50 billion just in insured property.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And of course, so many people don't have flood insurance in Florida because it's not required for your premium there. There is a separate federal plan, and we'll see about that. They talk about a disaster relief legislation that could fund more for flood, which is an issue in this state and other states. And then you got the fires in California. It should be a bill that nationally people can get behind because there's regionally throughout the country all types of natural disasters that need federal funding to help. There's going to be a lot of money. I don't know. I shouldn't say predict how much money is going to be going. We already know that by the way, it's more than $750 you get from FEMA. That is I believe, a first-time check that people are writing checks for right now. That is not like the only money that people get from FEMA. That has another piece of misinformation going out there. 1148 here on the dial. On 88.5 FM, you're listening to The Skinny here live here in the studios here at on East Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Tampa.
And if you want to join the conversation, give us a call, 813-239-9663, or send us an email, dj@wmnf.org.
And Billy, we appreciate Billy Christensen coming in here. This is kind of, again, a different type of show than we planned. I mean, for you, Billy, not that we planned for a hurricane, but because it is, we've got to adapt to the circumstances, so I appreciate you just kind of hanging out here with us.
No worries.
So also, let's repeat what we were talking at the beginning of the show. People are driving right now, and the authorities said yesterday, don't drive, and so I didn't, right? I pretty much hung at home yesterday. We saw a little bit of some damage in Plant City later in the afternoon. I did drive in today, and as you said, Ben, there are no stoplights anywhere, okay? It could be anarchy, but it won't be because people just need to be responsible and wait your turn on those four-way stops.
Treat them like a stop sign.
Exactly. And then the other thing is, of course, a lack of gasoline out there, and that is definitely. Billy, tell us again where you saw the Wawa.
Yeah, in Brandon on 301 and Bloomingdale, the Wawa is open with gas, and that was as of 9 o'clock this morning.
Mitch, let me just bring up some, an issue that nobody's concerned about except me. I saw a bunch of piles of utilitarian type stuff stacked up along the barrier islands on this walk last week. Big mountains of, serviceable stuff. Now, who wants to sleep on somebody else's old mattress? Not me. But there were chairs, and there were wicker baskets,
right.
and there were
Some nice
table
things.
lamps and things that had just been pushed out to the curb. The folks there had determined they no longer had a use for it. But stacked outside of some of these big piles of trash were signs on which people had spray painted, "You loot, we shoot," as if somebody needs to lose their life over picking through someone else's trash. I don't understand that. Have you seen this?
I
you
have.
noticed this?
I've seen a note on Facebook where somebody basically talked about that. A Republican official I know in town who was like, "What's the deal? I mean, why is that like considered stealing actually when it's considered trash? I mean,
It's going to the landfill,
Yeah.
right? Why can't folks come and take what they think they can use or resale
and by
or
the
whatever?
way, I have not heard, and so I don't want to say definitively here, but about the fear was about projectiles going all over the place because of all the extensive debris that we have here in the Bay Area. And I haven't heard too many reports about that. Obviously, with the huge, we saw structures falling all over the place and trees all over the place. So the power of the wind was quite intense on Wednesday evening. Whether it actually helped pick up debris and hurt somebody or hit a building, I'm not sure. I don't think it was as much as was the concern was, certainly. But let me ask you guys this, both of you. So Tampa Mayor Jane Castro, I said this about Bob Gualtieri on Sunday about 500,000 people need to evacuate. The officials were so intent on really making sure people take the storm seriously that they really put the fear of God into people. None stronger than Tampa Mayor Jane Castor, who on Monday night on CNN said, if people don't get out of these evacuated areas when we tell them to, you could die.
Yep.
And that was intense, and who couldn't get motivated by that? But also, some I saw react strongly and say, hey, that's a little bit too much fear-mongering. And there are some people who cannot get out for whatever reason. Don't shame them. I don't agree with that. Not to get opinionated here as the straightforward host here, but again, this is public officials, because we have seen some of the people who died 2 weeks ago in Pinellas County should clearly have evacuated, and they did not. You know why not? Because I've been here for 50 years. I've been here for 60 years. I've hunkered down through every one of them, and I'm still here. And then one time they weren't. And what else do you do? And Gualtieri said the same thing. We can't get you the rescue boats, if the water's too high. And that's what happened. They dropped 1,500 calls in Helene. They could not answer. I don't think they felt great about it, but they also didn't feel great about the fact that 1,500 people should have not been there, and you're relying on the government there to help you out.
Yeah.
So what are your guys' thoughts about it? Starting with Billy.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. I actually do have a thought on this. This storm or this incident has highlighted the fact that, especially for our leadership, we need objective leaders in these scenarios. We cannot have the doom and gloom. We need credible, factual information. We talk about misinformation all the time, especially from our elected officials. We look to you for guidance in these scenarios. And if you're given doom and gloom in the context that Mayor Castor did, I think that's very unhealthy for the community. She also said you can't fix stupid for the folks that left. It's impossible to ascertain everybody's personal situation in these scenarios. So I think those comments are short-sighted and they're not very helpful for our community. Again, it's important we elect objective administrators for these roles because they are advocating on our behalf, and we see the need for that more now in these scenarios, in these situations, than we do in any other times.
We also know that that this storm was a little wobbly. As we watched it approach the shore of Florida, we didn't know where landfall would happen, and this is important for a number of reasons, but primarily because the storm surge happens on the south side of the storm. Look, if you see this
the dirty
thing
side, they call
spinning,
it.
if you see this, it spins counterclockwise. And so had this made landfall further to the north, which it looked like it would in the days preceding, you saw Tampa Bay right in the middle of the cone of uncertainty. Had this thing made landfall to the north, we would be facing a whole different situation. As a result of where it made landfall, Siesta Key, that area on the south side of Tampa Bay, we saw the bay empty. We saw what some people now are calling reverse surge, which I'm not sure if that's a scientific term or if they're just making that up. But Hillsborough Bay got dry. Water came out of the bay when we were expecting this big push up into the bay. So a lot of these things come down to where the thing makes landfall. And those sorts of stern warnings, I think, are sometimes necessary because they're using the information they have at hand. And there can be changes in those storms. They're predictable in that they're slow and plodding, but they can be unpredictable in the sense that we don't know exactly what path they're going to take, and that can make a world of difference.
We were told at different times it would be midnight, past midnight. Right. It actually was 8:30. Things got quick pretty fast there. Okay, talking about rebuilding, right, and whether people should do it on the coast specifically. So I'm looking at a tweet from Christina Pashaw, DeSantis, one of his press people here, and she writes, in St. Petersburg this morning, a reporter asked if it's possible that some people won't be allowed to rebuild after Hurricane Milton, and she writes, Governor DeSantis unequivocally rejected that idea, and here I'll quote DeSantis, quote, people work their whole lives and work hard to be able to live in environments that are really nice, and they have a right to make decisions with their property as they see fit. It is not the role of government to forbid them or to force them to dispose or utilize their property in a way that they do not think is best for them. Okay.
And maybe the market bears that out, right, Mitch? Which will be interesting to see. There are still areas of the barrier islands with modest homes, with single-story homes that were built in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And I'm thinking of Treasure Island, St. Pete Beach along Blind Pass. Some of these areas, these aren't the huge mansions that you see in Bel Air Shores and Bel Air Beach that are built on stilts, that are up off the ground, that have, some hurricane protection. I wonder what's going to happen to those people. It seems to me, it stands to reason, I think, that if those folks can't rebuild, that those properties, might become the bigger, larger homes. As a realtor, do you work on the beaches at all, Billy?
Everything's supply and demand.
Yeah.
There's always going to be someone behind you. If you don't want it, there'll be somebody there to rebuild stronger, bigger, better kind of thing. So, back on the previous question about our objective, feedback from our leaders in these scenarios, they're struggling too with getting the right message out to protect the public, right? So they want to convey the urgency to get people out. And unfortunately, everything that we do right now is so highly politicized that we can't get away from it. And I just want to encourage everyone, as we're running out of time here, in our elections office here in Hillsborough County, we are going to bring a new level of objectivity and transparency that surpasses our Republican Democrat status quo. All right, this is our election. It's something that everybody needs to participate in. We have a 20% turnout in our primaries. We need a bigger turnout. I don't care about this hurricane. People need to vote, right? We need to get our votes out. And that's why the message I want to bring today. In light of everything, please get out to vote. Early voting starts October 21st. Get your mail-in ballot in. You can drop it off at one of the ballot boxes, and then obviously you can vote on voting day.
Is there anything that you've seen that you would be doing different right now, Billy, on the back end of this storm? Are there any gaps that you feel the current supervisor of election should be criticized for? Or are things going as planned?
In terms of the response in the storm?
In terms of, in particular to elections,
to be determined. I think the request that we started off the show on about getting the special extensions is a good start, but that's a statewide effort.
Guys, okay, that's, again, Billy Christensen, Republican candidate for Hillsborough County Supervisor elections. We just got a couple of minutes left to go here. A listener wrote in, texted and said, do you have any information on TECO's progress in restoring power to customers? For my area near USF Tampa, their website has been showing, quote, pending investigation since yesterday morning. Well, I'm looking at their Twitter page, and they put up a half hour ago, our 6,000 plus restoration workforce keeps on rolling and remains fully committed to restoring power for every customer impacted by Hurricane Milton. Break that down. We have no idea when people's power is getting back on in Hillsborough County. I mean, that's not really telling us anything, but thank you, TECO, for that.
Another thing that's happened in this storm, and having covered many of these in the past, I don't remember this being the case in previous storms, but the sort of all the corporations that now have your email address sending you sort of these softly worded, we care about you during the hurricane, just makes me roll my eyes so much and not want to even frequent that business again. I don't necessarily, I was going to say I don't need to hear from the dispensary, that they care about me during the hurricane, but actually that one's not too bad.
Yeah,
in my
maybe
book.
it actually helps, quite frankly.
But there are others that, it's a little too much. If you're out there and you've got a customer in Florida, they don't necessarily, and you're selling whatever, flowers, they don't necessarily need, your sympathy during the hurricane via email. It's just a marketing scheme, a marketing way, a way to market to these people. But anyways, a little too much for me.
We are almost out of time here, so want to say thank you again to Billy Christensen. Good luck to you in the race against Craig Latimer. As Billy mentioned, early voting is on October 21st, you said?
Correct.
Yeah, and of course, voting by mail is still happening. You can still request a vote by mail ballot right now. Okay, and of course, that's going on throughout the Tampa Bay area. Ben, last words here before we sign off and hopefully get back to normalcy next week.
Treat those lights like four-way stops. Stop blasting through there. Don't kill somebody.
Yeah, again, love thy neighbor. Okay,
Love thy neighbor.
There's one more. Tico says down to 500. Okay, here's Tico down to 530,000. Well, that's not really down, right, from what we said earlier. So it's moving downward, somebody says. Okay, optimism here. All right, so this is going to be it.
Hang
okay.
in there.
Again, Billy Christensen, Ben Montgomery. Ben, thank you so much. I'm Mitch Perry. Jessica Green coming through for us crucially today. Thank you so much for being here all week
and
long,
the whole
Jessica.
Staff here at MNF.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to us. You are listening to WMNF Tampa 88.5 FM. Stay tuned to Virgila Schilke is in the studio house. Great to see you, the hostess with the mostest. She's coming up right after NPR News. And everybody, take care of yourselves this weekend, and let's all try to get through this together.